Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Aaron Ranka, Chief Revenue Officer with Dama Financial. Thank you very much for joining me today, Aaron.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Aaron, I always like to start with a bit of background. How was it that you found yourself in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It wasn't the career path I chose at Michigan State, that's for sure, considering the legalization happened well before or well after that. So I was working my way up the ladder in a company called Fiserv in the payment space. So credit card processing, debit card processing. I admittedly had set up a couple clients in the cannabis space in the very early days with credit card processing prior to there being an issue with doing that. So I always had an interest in the space, and then the opportunity to join Dama and build out or continue building out a payments platform presented itself, and timing was good, so I jumped on board.
When did you join Dama?
So I joined October of 2022, so coming up on almost a year.
Okay. What were those first days like at Dama?
If you use the term drinking from a fire hose loosely, that's probably the best description. Admittedly not having a cannabis background really outside of just, knowing that it's green for the most part. It was very eye-opening to learn the challenges that cannabis related businesses and even ancillary businesses face day to day. It's actually pretty mind-blowing.
Who helped you with that learning curve?
Everybody, Googling certain articles, looking at LinkedIn, internal. I was literally asking everyone that I could, what's going on in the industry. I was talking to clients, talking to employees, talking to our board, our investment committee. I mean, everywhere there's an opportunity to learn something, I was barking up that tree.
What were some of the things that you found particularly jaw-dropping?
So, access to things that traditional businesses take for granted, like payment processing, for example. Traditional banking, lending, one of probably the biggest and most concerning thing that's still a problem with the industry is what I'll call the employee bill of rights, right? So you're a bud tender in, Johnny's cannabis shop. You want to go to your bank and get a loan, and your bank doesn't recognize your income, and you can't get a loan, right? Can't buy a car, can't buy a house, can't put your money in that bank. It's a pretty big challenge.
I never really thought of it from that perspective, just because we focus primarily on the business side of things. That's incredible. And that's, for how many employees operate within the cannabis industry, I mean, that can really shake up your personal life.
It could, totally. If I look at an average, let's call it 12 to 13 employees per mid-size or small business, and then you multiply by the number of dispensaries in the United States, that's a lot of people that are affected by something, that people would take for granted for the most part.
Is that something that their employers can help with in terms of products?
100%. Yeah. So it's probably more incumbent on banking, and specifically around, access to just federal legislation, like, say, for example, that says this is a safe space to bank. But employers have, some tools at their disposal through payroll or just helping streamline bank relationships with a handful of banks that are considering cannabis to be a viable income source. So yeah, absolutely. But there's still a lot of work to do.
When you came on board with Dama, what were some of your first things that you wanted to attack?
Well, I was brought in as a payments guy. So that was, job number one. It was probably 2 to 3 months after our chief revenue officer went into to the lending space. So the opportunity presented itself to go into this side of things and focused really more so than just payments, but banking, payments, point of sale, all the products that we offer, whether they're direct or even some that we partner with. So that was pretty eye-opening to get in to see really the big picture.
Okay. Well, Dama, hired a new CEO, Patrick O'Boyle, in February. How have things changed with some of the shakeups at the top?
It's actually very interesting. So Patrick came to us with payments experience and with banking experience, and specifically with servicing financial institutions, which is somewhat of the background I had, more of a payments background, working on behalf of a financial institution. So if you were to say we require three things from a executive leader, would be cannabis experience, banking experience, and payments experience. Hitting 1 out of 3 would be considered pretty good. We hit 2 out of 3 really, really well. So with his onboarding, the company itself, I'll say we were probably more like 4 or 5 companies operating under one roof. And that one roof was not really central. I mean, no one's going to, well, a couple people go to office buildings. But for the most part, our employment base is spread out across the US. So Patrick brought in an operating system called EOS, which a lot of small businesses or mid-sized businesses use to run and keep accountability, and really has done a tremendous amount of work to centralize multiple different avenues in the company to one company, right? So if you look at GrowFlow as a product, GrowFlow was a company that Dom acquired prior to Patrick and I both joining. Their entire set of core values was pretty similar, but didn't align exactly, right? So step 1, redefine core values. Step 2, define management structure. Step 3, accountability chart. And then roll that accountability out from executive leadership all the way down to, the newest employee that we have. So that was the very eye-opening and timely.
Was there a lack of accountability in the previous structure?
I wouldn't call it accountability. And the reason I use that term, so most organizations use an org structure, an org chart, which is really almost exactly the same thing as an accountability chart. The accountability chart to me it's almost semantics, where you're responsible for your position, but you're accountable to other people to make sure that your job is done, and they're accountable to you for the same reason. So interchangeable term, but probably a little bit more meaning with the term accountability.
Understood. In your opinion, how does Dama fit into the cannabis landscape?
I would say we're pretty quintessential. If you look at some of the companies, the single product companies that came after us or are emerging now, you see a lot of the same tendencies that Dama kind of was at the forefront for, right? So let's call, an ACH payment tool. We have a product called PayTender. There are multiple companies that are specifically ACH payments, right? And I would say the biggest benefit of kind of looking at what Dama did is being sole focused, right? Not product focused, but industry focused. If you look at traditional point of sale, traditional point of sale people say, oh yeah, you could use our point of sale for cannabis. You really can't, right? I mean, you need a very specific set of tools and structures in that point of sale to make it work for cannabis. And Dama being a leader in the industry, we are a cannabis business solutions company. It's the only industry that we service.
Being a leader in the industry, what are some of the things that Dama does kind of behind the scenes to sort of make sure they stay ahead of the pack?
So innovation is important, right? And internal investment, making sure that compliance is at the forefront of everything that we do. All the decisions, all the partners, all the relationships that we've formed or helped to form in the marketplace are done with that compliance mindset, right? And that's really the only way to remain in the industry, is to follow the rules to the exact letter, if not more so.
Mm-hmm. I was just having a conversation with somebody about that, about how there are still some operators that don't want to, for lack of a better term, follow the rules to the letter of the law and still have a little bit of pushback. I mean, do you find that just causes sort of like unnecessary risk?
Yeah, 100%, right? And it's not just the business owner, it's the employment base, it's the vendors, it's the consumer that goes into that dispensary and they're not open the next day. If you look at, for example, the ability to take your paycheck to a bank, right? Let's say you're a cannabis business operator and you don't renew your license. Well, your bank account gets shut down, or someone turns off access to your POS, or you don't pay your bills and you can't have people log in for work the next day. It's a pretty big disruption, right? I mean, that's mission critical to be open and operating and not have to worry about that going forward, right?
Right. Well, and you talk about things that are critical issues in the cannabis space, but are just like expected, just just a normal business for any other operator.
Yeah. I mean, you take it for granted, right? You go to the bank, you open a bank account, you get a debit card, you go buy things, right? You can't do that in cannabis necessarily. I mean,
Yeah.
very, very few opportunities for those things exist, and they don't exist in every state. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, now that I have two small kids, I have very little opportunity to use any disposable income, period. um, because you're on the financial side, I really wanted to talk to you a bit about safe banking. In your opinion, what is the state of the Safe Banking Act?
So I'm pretty optimistic. I always like to look at the glasses, half full versus half empty. The actual act itself is a continuation of work that started, 6, 7, 8 years ago or longer. If it doesn't pass, or if a version of it doesn't pass, the single store operator, or let's say the new market entry operator, or even a social equity operator, someone without access to, investment funds or business savvy, may or may not be in business in the next couple of years. I mean, it's a critical thing that has to happen. And I've been asked this question before: what happens to DAMA if SAFE passes? Right? Mm-hmm. Nothing. Right? I mean, we continue to provide a compliance wrapper for any bank that wants to receive CRB related funds. If you were to say safe banking passes tomorrow, I don't think the big red or the big blue or the big gray or whatever color bank you want to add, or a name bank, is going to say, oh, great, let's go open a cannabis division tomorrow, and we're going to go, be the leader, right? So you'll still need companies like DAMA for compliance, to make sure that things are going properly, to review licenses, just to really have the expertise of how to do this properly and comply with all the rules.
What are some of the bill's weaknesses, in your opinion?
I am I'm probably the least technical and the least political minded person that you've ever talked to.
Right on. So that means you're the most reasonable. You're the most reasonable.
Yeah, in my opinion, if it protects CRB's interests and it doesn't violate any laws, or no one's going to get hurt, it's a passive thing, right? It's been explained to me that there are parts of the bill that don't stack up for compliance reasons, or leave loopholes open for less regulated businesses to enjoy the benefits, right? And that's probably the easiest way I can say it is, the bill was designed for CRBs to have access to traditional financial services. There may or may not be some other businesses that benefit from that aren't as heavily regulated, and that could cause financial harm in the long run.
You've mentioned a couple of these already, but do you have the most critical issues for cannabis operators right now in a pre-safe landscape?
As far as like the problems that they're facing every single day?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, number one is financing, right? Yeah. And not just financing like, hey, can I get a loan and open a business, but financing like, can I take this bag of cash to the bank and deposit it? Or can I, instead of taking that bag of cash, can I convert that to an ACH? Or can I have a credit card terminal or a debit card terminal, or any sort of not cash payment available, where I'm not putting my employees in danger by dealing in cash, or having the burden or expense of, bringing that cash back into the mainstream.
Mm. What kind of hand-holding does DAMA have to do with its clients in order to make sure that they remain in compliance?
We have what I call the compliance brick wall. Her name is Michelle Sullivan. She is our chief compliance officer. Multiple years without aging her of compliance work in the banking space. And the amount of just effort that goes into validating who the beneficial owners are in a bank account, pretty mind-blowing. If you go to the bank, let's call it the bank, the traditional bank, right? You go to the bank tomorrow, there's 2 partners in a business, maybe there's 5, something like that. The bank is required to validate up to 4 owners of the business. Anything past, anything fractional under 25% doesn't really matter. Cannabis, 16 to 18% is probably a safe number. as far as beneficial owners go, we go down to the level of 10% roughly. And we don't do that to make it a burden to sign up with us. We do that to make sure that every single person in the business that has control of the business isn't going to be a problem later and cause the business to be shut down. So just the general, the amount of work that goes into one, opening account, and then two, servicing it and making sure that it stays open is pretty mind-blowing.
Can somebody with just a 10% stake in a cannabis business cause that much trouble?
Theoretically, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
How so theoretically?
Without giving away or causing any harm to reputations, but the federal government likes to look into where the money is, right? And who's in charge of the money, and what discretions they may or may not have done in the past. So, we deal with subpoenas fairly regularly, and they range from things like, I don't want to say white collar crime as a general term, but someone didn't pay their taxes, or someone had a felony for this, or someone didn't have their record expunged. It's just the myriad of reasons to look into someone's background is pretty mind-blowing as well.
Is the financial side of the business going to be that much more difficult for a lot of the social equity applicants that are in the industry?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird scenario for social equity, right? Because most of the social equity licensees that I've talked to or dealt with have some sort of backing behind them, right? So they're I don't want to say that they're like the scapegoat or the mule to get the license, because sometimes they are, but a lot of them have, some pockets behind them, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, or, we'll just say, so-and-so is pretty famous and they want to get into cannabis, so they go back a social equity person. From a business operation standpoint, just the amount of regulation and cost involved in running a cannabis operation, from taxes to processing of cash to purchase of equipment to the cost of being shut down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 days or whatever it may be, it adds up quick. And if you're not really buttoned up with having run businesses before and being savvy and having a lot of foresight, it's going to be challenging, right?
Right.
And then you factor in things like cost compression, supply issues. You can't, if you're in Michigan, you can't go to Ohio and wholesale a bunch of product and bring it across state lines. So if the entire Michigan economy for growing fell apart, or you don't have some sort of steady supply, you have a retail issue, right?
Right.
So you really need to have a really good team around you, right? You can't just be a single person running a store and expect to do really, really well, given the challenges in the landscape right now.
Is there any part of the legal U.S. market that DAMA isn't involved with, as far as states or territories?
So there are certain states that we do better than others, right? And probably the biggest example is the point of sale system. So GrowFlow is our point of sale. We do integrate with Metric and BioTrack, and we do integrate with some of the custom ones, like in Washington at CCRS. But there are states that haven't defined what their compliance rules are, or there's a new state I was talking to recently that they've got a catch-22, which is glaringly obvious, and they don't have a resolution for it. So if you're going to operate in a state, you have to be either a really big development shop with a ton of people saying, we're going to go make this thing work for every single compliance rule, or you have to pick a point of sale system that's already in that state, or that can do things quickly, right? So every state is a challenge. If you look at the country of Canada, they have a central system for running your business, right? It's federally legal. They've got central sources for inventory. There's a lot of controls that make it kind of ubiquitous across all of the territories. In the United States, all of the states where it's legal, 23 or 24 for adult use or more now, every single state's different, right? And not like two little things, but pretty glaring differences.
What's the state with the catch-22?
It's over on the right-hand side of the country.
Okay. On the right-hand side, on the north side?
Yeah, the right hand on the top right corner, somewhere up there. Yeah.
Somewhere up there.
And it's, to be honest with you, it's not a really bad or crazy loophole. It's just, they want you to do one thing, and then in order to do that one thing, you need to go collect some information that you're not supposed to collect.
Okay. Um, you talk about being on the forefront of innovation. What are some of the issues that your customers are coming to you looking to solve that you still don't have a product or solution for?
On the banking side, it's having a credit card to go buy supplies, right?
Yeah.
The ability to purchase on credit or to finance. Let's say you're a grower and you want to go buy some lights, right? Unless you use a debit card or an ACH, pretty hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
So credit card is a pretty big one. Some of the benefits that we've built into our online account center for Dalma is to really make our banking product feel like you're going to the big whatever bank we'll call it website. And we are adding the capability for international wires for non-cannabis related purchases, which is a pretty big scenario considering some of the supplies come from outside of the four walls of the US.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just two relatively easy ones, right? The rest of them are, how do I put money in the bank account without having it picked up by a courier? Or can I write this person a check and it clears? Or so-and-so works for me and they want to get a 401k plan, but we're a dispensary and the investment company won't take them because they don't recognize the income.
Mm-hmm.
That was a challenge I had personally, right? I switched my 401k from the previous company. And the new company looked at my title and the fact that I'm in the cannabis space, and they were like, we don't want that business, right? So
Really?
we had to, I don't say we put up a big fight, but we have essentially said, I'm not touching plants every single day and selling the actual product. We're cannabis business solutions, right? We're a B2B company like anyone else, right? But just having that level of scrutiny is it's challenging. And to me, that was a relatively easy one. I don't even want to think about some of the stuff that employees in the dispensary have to face on a day basis.
Well, I think that's important to note, though, that I think sometimes when you're on the ground, when you're on the plant floor or you're on a boots on the ground employee, that you sometimes don't think that the issues they're going through go all the way up through the C-suite in the cannabis industry. So as the chief revenue officer of Dama, how's business?
Business is challenging, right? And a friend of mine asked me, like, what do you like about your job? I said, well, it's not the same thing every day. It's not the same thing every minute. It's not the same thing every second. It's literally that dynamic where something could change immediately. Now, I would say Dama is in a really good position overall. We've got a really good board of directors. We've got a great leadership team. We've got unbelievable employees that love what they're doing. They show up happy. Doesn't matter what position you are in. If you don't exude the core values of Dama and you don't fit in, it's probably not a good industry or place for anyone to work, really. So dynamics of the industry are probably what are causing a lot of the grays you see on the side of my head, but I wouldn't change it anytime soon.
Understood. I caught the same grays. When you're talking about getting these questions from customers, almost like, on an hourly basis, minute by minute basis, how are those coming in and how do you prioritize, who you're going to help first?
So we have, like I said before, our team, our employment base is top notch, right? So if it's a question around customer service, we've got a customer success, we've got customer happiness, we've got on the POS side of things, we've got implementation, we've got customer service on that side as well. I mean, we've got leadership teams in place to handle things like this every single day. If it's a announcement for a MasterCard, it's going to a different group. Whereas if it's, I don't feel like I'm compliance because this law says this and you do that, that goes to a team, right? And as things come in, we monitor through a ticketing system. We keep track of our response rates. We run this thing like a professional services company should. Mm-hmm. Priority is an interesting topic, right? And all of our products have product managers, and those product managers are constantly scouring the market, taking feedback from sales, feedback from customer service, feedback from they went into a store and bought a product just to see how it went, and factoring those things into our solutions, right? Mm-hmm. Good example on the point of sale side of things. We have a point of sale system. It works in, theoretically in every state in the union. It works better in other states based on how things transfer in and out. we wanted that system to integrate with our wholesale platform. So if you're a grower, or if you're vertically integrated, or you're a grower and you sell to someone on the GrowFlow retail system, instead of them importing your products and going through and, spending hours matching up product codes and so on and so forth, we just transfer. So wholesale transferring to retail, it's a big differentiator, big time saver, right? And if we can save someone time, we can help them make their business more efficient.
You had mentioned the MasterCard's recent news. How did Dama process that information internally, and how does that stand to impact the industry going forward?
So it's not the first time that we've seen a letter like that. It's not the last time we'll probably see a letter like that or see a shakeup or a shutdown in the industry. We took it in stride as far as leadership team met, talked about it, understood our options, and planned a strategy to continue to be in the marketplace. If you were to look at our point of sale system, 4 months ago, we were offering a couple payment options, cash like everyone else. Thankfully, we have a product called PayTender, which is ACH. Mm-hmm. And we've got a relatively healthy, clientele using it. And we had a PIN debit program, right? And we had to push pause on PIN debit while we redrafted and kind of reworked a couple things. But we came back with a strategy that said, I don't want 3 payment options, I want 6, right? 2 ACH, 2 PIN debit, and 2, whatever we think is compliant and cool, right? So one of the really interesting parts of this industry that I marvel at daily is that you could be a point of sale system company and you could have a product, and a competitive point of sale system may not have that product, and you may or may not be working together to share products or white label products, or generally speaking, just working together for the betterment of the industry. And, I came from traditional business. You wouldn't see Toast point of sale go into Clover saying, hey, let me borrow that thing for 6 months while we build it. In cannabis, you're seeing some of those partnerships. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Okay. Did you see, was there any foreshadowing, or did you see any signs about MasterCard's move?
We did not, right? So knowing the payment space and knowing some of the big players, I probably have more information than most as far as, what happened and why it happened, so on and so forth. And probably the best answer I can give is that no matter what you do, this industry is in the shade of gray still. Mm-hmm. So without federal reform, doesn't matter your product, your service, your state, your industry, anything, it is still technically liable to be shut down, right? And sadly enough, if you've been in this industry long enough as an operator, you've had a product or service shut down. And sadly, not going to be the last time, unfortunately.
Any predictions as to when that federal reform might happen?
Yesterday, please. Right? No, yeah. I mean, that could happen tomorrow too. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens tomorrow, but I'm hoping yet this year.
That is on the more optimistic side of the people I've spoken with. So I'm rolling with that one. I like that. Being in multiple states, how does your team stay on top of, the very specific regulations state by state to make sure that your customers are in compliance?
So we've got a really, really intelligent head of compliance internally. So like the regulation side of things. So Michelle on the, banking and fintech side, and internally on like the states, we've got an entire group of people that review all the regulations, right? And it's not just the head of compliance, it's head of product, it's sales, it's clients tell us what's going on. Or, we roll out in a new state and we think we're 80-90% of the way there. We get into that state, we deploy, and we work with the owners to say, we need to do this, this, and this, right? We work with the actual states themselves. So we're scouring for information. People are coming to us with ideas. And it's really just kind of like a mess of, bunch of balls in the air, all kind of funneling down to whatever product we're offering in that state.
I mean, working with the states themselves, how often is there, we're having a conversation with the regulatory body and you're just like, the state you mentioned earlier, we were just like, hey, just so you know, these two completely contradict one another.
Yeah, right. So this is a good story. So we have a client on the East Coast, frustrated as all can be for obvious reasons, right? We're not a compliance regulation monitoring company. We're not giving legal guidance on how to comply with your state's rules. We've read the rules. We've built our product to do what we think makes sense. Ultimately, it's on the state itself to say either you are or you're not in compliance, or a legal lawyer or someone like that, or a compliance official that could say this is proper. So this particular situation came across my desk. We rallied the troops, tried to figure out how to make the best case of the scenario. And I said, why don't we just call the state and find out? So Friday afternoon, like last Friday, I called up the state and got voicemail. They're out of office. They called me back Monday. They followed up on an email and said, here are the regulations. I said, no problem. Here are the reasons that we did this. Here are the reasons where we think we need to do what we do to make this work. How do you feel about that? And they came back with essentially along the lines of, if you feel like you have to violate one regulation to satisfy another, you can have the client apply for a waiver until we figure it out. And that's not bad on the state. That's just, whoever advised them on writing the regulations maybe didn't understand how it works to collect information. But they've been good. They've been responsive. We've gone back with, here's where this doesn't make sense. And hopefully we can come to a resolution that, one, satisfies the client, keeps them in compliance, and two, helps the state amend their rules, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is an incredible story. One thing I like about this industry is the collaborative aspect of it. Does that collaborative aspect, does that go to the regulatory side as well, or was this more of an anomaly?
So I'll be perfectly honest. That's the first time I've actually called the state board and asked a question. So I was impressed. I don't know that happens anywhere else, but I don't know that it doesn't either. So hoping it does. And next time an issue bubbles up, I'll call that state and I'll find out.
Excellent. Well, before you got into the industry, did you have a personal relationship with cannabis? I know that you said earlier you just knew that it was green, but anything else that sort of you had a relationship with?
Nothing. Zero. I mean, I have some friends that operate stores, right? And they started with, we're going to be the gardening supply stores. And I have some friends that, in the back of their property, they, had some gardening activities, something like that, but just never was, it was never a thing that intrigued me, really.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've noticed about the cannabis industry is kind of once it gets its hooks in, that people are there to stay. Coming from the traditional financial industry, are you here to stay on the cannabis side, or, are you entertaining all offers?
I will tell you this, that my eyes have been open to the point that I have been in dispensaries and purchased products, and not just to, the Friday night, let's go see what happens. But specifically, I had a relatively bad car accident, 15 years ago, something like that. So broke my leg, broke my back, and broke my pelvis all in the same shot. And so, at some point, Tylenol or Advil or Motrin or any sort of painkiller may not cut it. So keeping my options open to see if there's an alternative. If that's the case, I'm assuming it is, considering what I've heard. Yeah, 100%. No reason to leave.
Aaron, I want to thank you very much for your time today, and especially for your insight on the cannabis industry when it comes from the finance side of things. Before we get out of here, is there anything else in particular that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or Dama Financial?
So we, as a bank or a bank service company, have been known as Dama Banking Solutions, right? If you look at the corner of my screen, if you look at Google today, if you go to our website, or websites plural, you're going to see Cannabis Business Solutions, right? We're not just a banking service company. We're point of sale, we're payments, and we've got access through partners with insurance, payroll. We even have the little cameras that are forward facing for your car, and internal facing. So certain states, 2 in particular, require either 2 human beings in the vehicle for delivery, or a human being and a camera system. And so whatever, to satisfy the legal requirements, you could put 2 people or put a camera. from a safety perspective, if you've got a camera forward facing on your rearview mirror and you pull up to a delivery that goes wrong, someone may or may not do what they were intending to do if they see that camera. So it's not just, get a bank account and you're happy. It's, if you get a license, you call DAMA and we will do our best to make sure you have all of the solutions you need to run your business.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for taking the time today, and I hope we get a chance to talk again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at David@Cannabis Equipment News with email the podcast in the subject line. Also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Aaron Ranka, Chief Revenue Officer with DAMA DAMA Cannabis Business Solutions, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.